For 800 years, it was the center of the known world, the eternal city, Rome. Its citizens went about their daily lives protected by a myth of invincibility, a belief that its walls, its legions, and its gods could never fail. But on a hot August night in 410 AD, an unthinkable sound echoed through the alleys. It was not the familiar rumble of the Forum, but the terrifying blast of barbarian war horns inside the city walls. For the common citizen, huddled in their small apartment, this was the sound of the world ending. The myth was broken. The eternal city was about to fall. This is not the story of emperors or generals. This is the story of survival, told from the perspective of an ordinary person whose only goal was to live through the next 3 days. How do you hide when your city is being torn apart? Where do you find food when the world is on fire? And what desperate choices must you make to survive the end of an empire? Subscribe now to witness the harrowing, untold story of the sack of Rome. The story we often told is that the sack of Rome was the fall of the Roman Empire, a single cataclysmic event where barbarian hordes destroyed civilization in a fiery apocalypse. This is a powerful myth, but it's not the truth. The fall of Rome was not an event. It was a long, slow, and agonizing process that took centuries. The sack of 410 AD by the Visigoths was not the end of the empire, in fact. The Western Roman Empire would limp on for another 66 years. Instead, it was a brutal, psychologically devastating symptom of a much deeper decay. For the first time in 8 centuries, the heart of the world had been pierced. The true story of the sack is not about the end of an empire, but about the shattering of an idea. The idea that Rome was eternal and invincible. It's a story about what happens when the impossible becomes a terrifying reality. To understand the citizens' terror, you must understand the political storm that left them defenseless. In 410 AD, the Western Roman Empire was a shadow of its former self, crippled by internal corruption, civil wars, and economic collapse. The true capital was no longer Rome, but the easily defensible swamp-bound city of Ravenna, where the young, indecisive emperor Honorius hid behind his walls. The Visigoths, led by their king, Alaric, were not simply a barbarian horde. They were a displaced people, former allies of Rome who had been betrayed and mistreated by the Roman government. Alaric didn't want to destroy Rome. He wanted a homeland for his people and a title for himself within the empire. For 2 years, he had marched his army up and down Italy, besieging Rome twice and demanding concessions. Both times, Honorius refused. In August of 410, after the final, arrogant refusal from the emperor, Alaric's patience ran out. He marched on Rome for a third and final time, but the city, though poorly defended, was still a formidable fortress. It would not be taken by force, but by betrayal. Our story follows Lucius, a simple artisan living in a crowded tenement near the Tiber. The daily routine of the first day was one of confusion and rumor. Whispers spread that the Goths were at the gates again, but no one truly believed the walls would fall. Then, in the dead of night, the unthinkable happened. The Salarian gate was opened, likely by slaves within the city hoping for freedom. The first sounds were the horns, followed by the tramp of thousands of feet and the first screams. For Lucius, the routine of life instantly vanished, replaced by the singular, primal routine of survival. He gathered his wife and 2 small children, barricading the door of their small apartment. The first day was a blur of terror, listening to the sounds of chaos outside, the splintering of doors, and the shouts in a foreign tongue. By the second day, the sack began in earnest. The Goths were Christians, and their leader Alaric had given orders to spare the great basilicas of St. Peter and St. Paul. These churches became desperate sanctuaries. Lucius and his family joined a flood of terrified citizens seeking refuge in a nearby church, hiding in its dark, damp crypt. For the next 48 hours, their world was this cramped, suffocating darkness. Their daily routine was a desperate whisper, a constant prayer. They listened to the muffled sounds of the city being torn apart above them, the crashes of looted furniture, the distant cries. Their water ran out. Hunger gnawed at them. The greatest fear was discovery. By the third day, an eerie quiet began to fall over the city. The Goths, laden with plunder, were beginning to leave. Trembling, Lucius and his family emerged from the darkness into a world they no longer recognized. The routine of survival had just begun. Of all the horrors, the invasion, the hiding, The aftermath. Which phase do you think would be the most psychologically damaging? Tell us your thoughts in the comments. The story of what they found outside is still to come. Our knowledge of this cataclysm comes from the shell-shocked accounts of those who lived through it. From his monastery in Bethlehem, the scholar Saint Jerome received the news and wrote the most famous epitaph for the event. "My voice sticks in my throat. The city which had taken the whole world was itself taken." His words capture the profound disbelief that echoed across the empire. In North Africa, St. Augustine was so moved by the event and the subsequent blame game, pagans claiming the disaster was punishment for abandoning the old gods, that he began writing his masterpiece, The City of God. He argued that the fall of the earthly city was insignificant compared to the eternity of the heavenly one. A theological argument born directly from the trauma of the sack. These are the words of the great thinkers, but the story of the common citizen is written in the archaeological layer of ash and ruin that still lies beneath modern Rome. The cultural impact was immediate and profound. The sack of Rome shattered the myth of Roman invincibility that had been the psychological bedrock of the Western world for generations. It was a declaration to everyone that the old order was truly dying. For the common citizen like Lucius, the experience was not one of geopolitical shifts, but of a total collapse of reality. The laws, the markets, the social structures that had governed his every waking moment were gone. Survival depended on pure luck, on the whim of a Gothic soldier who might spare you or kill you for the sandals on your feet. It depended on finding a hidden source of water or a discarded loaf of bread. The Goths were primarily interested in portable wealth, gold, silver, and slaves. They plundered the homes of the rich but often left the poor with what little they had. For a brief, terrifying period, the rigid social hierarchy of Rome was erased, replaced by the simple, brutal division between the armed and the unarmed, the victor and the vanquished. In the end, the story of a citizen's survival during the sack of Rome is a timeless and universal one. It is a story about the extreme fragility of civilization, the complex systems of law, commerce, and social order that we take for granted can, in the face of crisis, collapse with terrifying speed. But it is also a story of human resilience. Lucius and his family, emerging into the smoking ruins of their world, did what survivors have always done. They began to rebuild. They searched for loved ones, cleared the rubble, and started the slow, painful process of creating a new life from the ashes of the old. The sack was a mortal wound to the city's pride, but Rome, the eternal city, would survive. Its citizens, though battered and traumatized, would endure. What do you think? Was the sack of Rome the end of an era, or simply a brutal chapter in a city's long and resilient history? Let us know in the comments. If you're fascinated by the dramatic turning points of the ancient world, subscribe and hit the notification bell. And click here to watch our next video. The Secret Life of a Vestal Virgin. What really happened inside the Temple of Vesta?